The part we're going to focus on now is the spout part, which is, that's the cap there, which has a seal on it and a chain. But the part we're going to focus on is that spout there, which has a thread on the inside and is sweat soldered into the end piece around here. Now the plans we're going to focus on for this information here, so we have the spout, which is 12 millimeters in diameter, and then we have some detailed drawings of that spout which are over on this side of the page. So we can see we have a 2 millimeter spigot on this end, which is simply a little groove going all the way around, which helps it sit inside the brass sheet metal when we sweat solder. We have a symbol inside there, which is a double line, which represents the internal thread. We have these cross lines here, these little sort of dashes, and they represent an engineering item which has been sectioned or cut in half so that you can see the detail on the inside. Alright, so let's go to our lathe. That's our piece of material, our 12 millimeter brass stock, which we will need to face, drill and thread. We need to set our lathe on the right speed. For this particular job, I'm going to go for a speed of 755. We could go as high as 1255 for this diameter brass, but it's going to be a lot more comfortable going at 755. Where did I get that information from? Well, there's a chart on the wall over here, and so we look up the material there. We've got brass is second from the bottom, run it along to the diameter, and that comes to this number here, 1250 RPM, or revs per minute. This particular lathe has a lever down the bottom here. When we pull it towards yourself and push it down, or push it away and down, then that turns the chuck in this direction. If we push it away and lift it up, then it operates the lathe in reverse. Now we want to have the lathe operating in a forward motion, rotating towards ourselves. So push the lever away and down. Okay, away and down. So we're going to take the chuck key, we're going to place our piece of material in there. That's our stock piece of material. We're only going to use a small amount of this, but we would work with a longer length, and probably the piece that you'll get will be a piece that will go right through the headstock, quite long. You know, could be 300 millimeters long. Alright, so we're going to put that in there, make sure it's central in the jaws, have it protruding only pretty much about the amount you need. About 20 millimeters should give us plenty of room to do everything we need to do on it. The next time we take it out of the chuck, it will be when you're finished. Obviously, if you don't finish within the time, within the school period, then you'll need to take it out so it can be stored, named and stored. But for what I'm going to do, I'll only tighten this once. I'll only tighten the chuck key once. Chuck key goes back in the rack. Don't leave it sitting in the chuck, otherwise you turn the chuck on, the chuck key is going to go flying, probably at you. Alright, back in the rack. We're going to start our lathe. We're going to position our tool. A closer look at that. Position our tool so this front edge, let's change that setting. We're going to position our tool so that this front edge here, that edge that I've got the steel rule against, is pretty much at right angles to the surface we're going to machine. And then we're going to move the tool across. This is called facing, and we're going to move it across the face of the work. Right. Lay it on. Moving the tool nice and slowly across the face. until we're finished. Then we've got a nicely faced surface. Right, now we're going to drill through the centre of the piece of brass on the lathe, and then we're going to cut a thread. Now the thread is an M10, which stands for metric, and it's diameter 10, and here we have the tap. I sit down on the table so we can see that. We have a tap here, and on the tap are written some numbers, and it's got M10 times 1.5. Now the 1.5 is the pitch, and so we will use that 1.5 number subtracted from the 10 to give us the drill size, which means we're going to use an 8.5mm drill. Now before we drill with the 8.5mm drill, which is this one here, in preparation for tapping the thread with the M10 tap, we're going to use a drill called a combination centre drill. I'm going to put that in the drill chuck, which is in the tailstock, and tighten that up. Make sure that's nice and snug in the tailstock. And we're going to use that drill now to centre drill. Now centre drilling is, we're not going to drill in very far, we're just going to make a small mark, clamp the tailstock. Only need to drill in about 2mm. That has located the centre of the work. Now if we don't use this little combination centre drill, then a larger drill, which is much longer, can wander off centre, and will continue to do so. Won't come right by itself. Let's bring that up close to the work, and then I'm going to lock the tailstock nice and firm, and then we're going to use the handle on the end just to feed the drill through nice and slowly. We need to go through a depth appropriate to our piece of work. So if we go through 20mm, that will be plenty. So on our scale here, you'll see a little scale here. It has some etchings on it in millimetres. At the moment it says 22, so if we go through to 42, that should be plenty. Alright, now we're going to put the tap, the thread cutting tap. We're going to use the intermediate tap, which has a slight taper on the end, and we're going to tap through to the depth that we have in there, which is about 20mm. The spout itself is going to be 14mm long, so that should be plenty to finish the thread off. Now we're going to position the tap in the drill chuck in the tailstock here, and it's got a square end on it. We're not going to use that square end because there are 3 drills here and 4 sides, so that wouldn't be centralised. So we're going to grip it on this cylindrical shank part. Alright, let's do that. Get in there nice and tight, clamp that up. This time we're not going to operate the lathe, we're going to turn the lathe off. I'm going to turn it off at the wall, just so it can't be accidentally turned on. Bring the tailstock up, and then we're going to rotate the chuck by hand, and let the tailstock slide, and just rotate the chuck by hand, and you can see it's starting to pull the tap in. Once you rotate it about 3/4 of a turn, then we need to go back, which is normal for any thread cutting. And so that forwards and then backwards motion, always cutting new fresh metal as we rotate forwards, and then as we go backwards it chops off the little curls of swarf which form in the flutes, these grooves along the tap itself. Now you can see the thread is finished inside there. There is a bunch of swarf in there which will fall out once we take it out of the lathe. And what we're going to do now is mark out, is we're going to set the tool up so that we can cut the little spigot. And if we have a look at our plans, so that's that That's that little corner piece in there, which is 2 millimeters along and 1 millimeter deep. So to help us with our marking out, we're going to put some ink on the end. And remember, we've got that measurement of 2 millimeters, and so we're going to use this tool here, a pair of oddly calipers. They're called oddlegs for a pretty obvious reason. Both ends are not the same, they're odd. Alright, and so what we're going to do now is we're going to take the steel rule and we are going to set that on. Now we're almost finished. We just want to remove it now from the stock, and so what we're going to do is put some more ink on, and we're going to put a mark on at the 14 millimeter mark, because our plan tells us that it is 14 millimeters long. And so we're going to use our oddly calipers again. We're going to set it on 14 millimeters. Right there. Start the lathe. Once again, just drag the odd legs. And I actually touched it twice, but it is the second mark along there, and so that's where we're going to cut it off. And so to cut it off, we're going to use this tool here, which is called the parting tool, and we fit that to the lathe, and this end here is the part that does the cutting, and so it's going to go in like that. But we're going to cut on the waste side of the line, so it's the left hand side, so we need to position that in the tool post. Let's come back so you can see that. Position it in the tool post, take the tool from the, have that only protruding as far as you really need to, which is only a very small amount. Let's bring that along into the light a bit more. Okay, so this is our parting tool. As we clamp it here, it closes down and locks that in position. And we don't need to clamp it very tight. Just firm. We have 3 clamping bolts, so they don't need to be winched up really tight. In fact, you can do some damage that way, so just nice and firm. Just one hand twisting is plenty of force. Alright, so what we're going to do now is going to go up to and part that off. Obviously we need to rotate the tool post so that we get the parting tool at right angles to the axis of the lathe, or the surface of the material in this case. Take that along. I'm going to bring the tool up. I'm going to part that off. Position it, start the lathe. Nice and slowly. And there she goes. Right, so this is our finished part, our finished component. It has a little stepped edge on this side. It has kind of really sharp edges, and so what I'm going to do now is put it back in the lathe and use the corner of the lathe tool while the piece is rotating, just to take those really sharp edges off. So back in the chuck it goes. Chuck clear away, start the lathe. Just touch it on the outside, same on the inside, edge of the thread, a little bit like that. Do the same for the other end, and that gives us a nice corner. Alright, we've set our odd lead calipers on 2mm, and so now we're going to start the lathe, and very carefully hold the odd lead calipers underneath so that the point drags, so we're dragging underneath as it rotates. There you'll see a very clear mark at the 2mm mark, and so we're going to bring the tool up now and we get close up to our piece of work like this. We'll bring it up until it just touches, and we can tell that by just moving it backwards and forwards until we leave a little bit of mark in the ink, and then we know we're just touching and no more, and there we go. Alright, now on this particular lathe, and not all lathes are the same, we have got some measurements. Now this hand wheel here, I don't want to rotate this hand wheel because the lathe tool is just touching the work and no more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this on 0, set the hand wheel on 0 there. This lathe, the measurements on here are actually taken off the diameter, and we want to go in 1mm, which means we're going to take 2mm off the diameter. So if we set this on 2mm, 1.4, 1.6, 1.8 and up to 2mm, start our lathe. And then move across to the 2mm mark. And so what that means is now we've made the spigot, which is 2mm long that way, and it is 1mm in depth. Great. Now this is the part we just made, and this is the item off the lathe, fresh off the lathe, and you can see that it has the spigot on here. Now that spigot is eventually going to sit inside a hole in the brass. Alright, now you may notice that this one here is shorter than this one. This one is not made to specification, this one is. Alright, the proof of the pudding really is in the testing.